Hi there, this is Jim the Keys bartender. I'm turning down the music right now. Stopping this, I'm under the assumption that we're recording our voices right now. If you pick up the microphones, these are yours. I'll be able to see.
Close G like this.
Well, yeah, be friendly to the microphone, like a close personal friend.
Okay.
I'm here with Gabby and Joel. Do you have Joel's? Do you go by the same last name, or
No.
do you know? What's Gabby?
My last name is...
Do you want to say it?
Oh, no. Not necessarily. But
Do
I
you
don't
feel
go by the
comfortable?
same name. I don't go by the same name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't
Just-
have to,
just
before you
call
say
me-
you like how I call you.
Just call me Stretch.
We're going to call him Gary.
Stretch. That's,
We won't call you Joel then. We'll call you. So, but
Stretch.
people know you, Joel and Gabby, who live in
Yeah.
Spain part of the year and in Key Largo. I think that's a big enough clue for people. And it'd just be the people that are somewhat acquainted with you.
Right, right.
I mean, as long as the debt collectors don't pick up on it,
Yep. Oh,
I think we're cool.
Well, I told you about on the podcasting app. They give they break out demographics on it, and it's interesting because debt collectors are my number 2 demographic.
Listeners,
That and 14-year-old girls. Yeah. No.
Hey,
So
I don't know. What are you doing?
No, nothing. So we both, you and Joel, do you still see clients?
No.
Do you,
No.
Only the ones that are friends that find out we're therapists. And then sometimes they will.
Isn't that a conflict?
Well, it's so we don't really do therapy. Like, we're not going to do therapy with you.
I'm not asking
Today.
for therapy. I'm not asking for therapy. I wanted to.
I thought you were. I had this all-
No. If I was, let's view it as. Okay, I'll give you. Well, this will probably set the table. I just wanted to talk that I noticed that path walking in here. It was, and I remember to this day, it was designed by someone under 6'2". Because the walkway. Oh yeah, well, it's 2 inches. It would have hit me squarely in the forehead, and much like the designers of subway cars and things, because I guess it's a size thing.
Yeah.
And I thought that's an internal monologue. I said, "Oh, how thoughtless of someone!" Because I am not a super tall person. I just reach. I think I'm in the beginning of tall.
Yeah.
6'4". And if you were joining special clubs for tall people, I think I would be the short guy
among the tall guys.
In the tower.
You'd be a
there was
guard.
a dating society called the Tower Club.
You'd be a guard.
Yeah.
And be a, yeah.
Oh, if I was a really good shooter, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But that's the way I think. And if you were going to give, let's say, to an employer, let's say a high-end employer, sometimes they put people through their HR department. The first time I saw was a Miracle on 34th Street, I think it was, where they sent the guy who played Santa Claus to the store HR representative. He was kind of he was an informal. He wasn't a psychologist. He fancied himself a psychologist, and he pronounced the guy Chris Kringle as being crazy. But you think I would put it like that, or even if you were a forensic. And did you mention Mindhunter to me?
Yes.
You mentioned Mindhunter. You can do a criminal. You can, and I'd be perfectly fine if you find any similarities in me between me and a serial killer, or someone
now
who.
that you mention it,
Yeah, or someone I'm sure is a pathological liar.
Yeah.
Or anything like that. So
Sociopath.
Sociopathic, yes. There's a book I read called The Sociopath Test. It does not make me an expert, from what I understand. It diagnoses almost, one of the things the guy says, almost every CEO of a Fortune 500 company would qualify as a sociopath, according to the test.
Yeah.
According to the test, and I'm not calling every CEO of Fortune 500 a sociopath.
Right.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
So, and how would we begin? I can write down some of the things that I think are big personality traits of mine, and mine is harboring a malicious internal dialogue sometimes.
I do have a little story. Going back to what you were saying about HR and
let's hear it.
There are things like there's something. Well, that's management sort of psychology, but there's also industrial psychology, and it's how you set things up for people to use them correctly and that sort of thing. So there's a famous story when with the first high rises in New York City, they clearly didn't put in enough elevators, and so it would cost them a small fortune to put more elevators in. So they called in a psychologist, and he said, "Oh, just put mirrors in the lobby and give people a chance just to preen themselves. You won't get any more complaints about how slow the elevators are." Sure enough,
that was industrial design. That's design coming in.
Well, by a psychologist.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's fairly famous. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
And they actually measured how impatient they were before and after, or this is just anecdotal.
No, they, Well, they I'm sure they made the fact of the matter is they
probably got fewer complaints.
Yeah. I'm sure they ain't quantifiable because they write them down in those big high-rise buildings for very.
But they didn't need stats on this, Yeah.
Okay.
Joel is really more of the researcher than I am. He got his training in research first.
Okay.
Did you know that on brain function?
Well, I know we talked about music, how he used he came up with the music therapy, polyphonic. Was that?
Yeah, we put brainwaves into
synthesizers.
Yeah,
and you were able to
music of the hemispheres. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah,
but even before that, when he did his training before he got his doctorate, it was more an experimental psychology.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
I was a brain researcher to begin with, and then I slowly switched over to clinical.
Was there a coherent? Well, when you get back to the music, was there a coherent melodic? That makes me have to go to the bathroom here. Listen to that. Yeah.
You've been well trained.
Yes. It's a Pavlovian response. Yes. So you were. What was your clinical training in?
Neuroscience.
Okay.
Well, the clinical and my clinical training was, to be a talk therapist, and over toward behavioral medicine, biofeedback.
Okay.
But to get to your point about diagnosing, sociopathic features or whatever, he did his clinical training in the prison system. He learned almost everything from. He was very lucky. He had a good teacher.
I think that would be like the first question anybody would ask when they're interviewing someone that worked with prisoners and things. I try not to get worked up. These is isolating mic, so this won't even show up on there. So that the first question would be, how many, psychopaths would you think? I think it's very difficult. It would be very difficult to say how many psychopaths, because you could actually come in contact with them and not realize that you have been.
No, but we did psych testing when we were putting therapy groups together.
Yes.
About 10% in the Maryland Penitentiary in 1976
had psychopathic tendencies, or
were diagnosed as psychopaths. Really? And the rest of them, see, this is at the break point between old school psychology and, behavioral, cognitive, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so we use the term neurotic. The rest of them were kind of neurotic, and maybe about 2% were psychotic.
Okay. Well, I hope through some questioning maybe you'd be able to tell if I answer truthfully.
What you are?
Yes.
Who you are?
Mm-hmm.
But, we don't really like to put labels on people. Sure. That's very old school.
No, but be old school. I won't hurt my feelings, because actually it's all for entertainment purposes at the end. Obviously, I've been labeled a lot of things in my life. and I've deservedly so.
Yeah.
I've done
All of them?
well, there was reasons for it.
Reasons.
There were, you know. So.
You want to talk about that?
Yes. There's been. I toy with the idea of manic depression, having problems with manic depression and things like that. And I looked up because I had the classic number one factor was substance abuse.
Right. As a self-medicating
Yes.
thing.
Erratic behavior. Though I imagine with certain things you don't have to have all the factors or all
Correct.
the signs.
No,
Correct.
Like
yeah.
you're not necessarily. I'm not
Yeah.
suicidal. Shopping is hard. I can see that. I like shiny objects. Purchasing on Amazon. The guilt after your behavior because you react. You go through seesaw.
It's funny you don't look Jewish.
There's a lot of Catholic guilt.
Catholic guilt
yeah,
is
well,
similar
that's
in
right.
some
They're
way.
in second
No.
place.
6 and 1, half a dozen of another. Yeah, right.
Pressured speech. Now, what's your understanding of rapid speech? Pressured speech?
When you're manic, yeah. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Depression. I ranked all those for myself too. Mania, inflated ego.
No.
You miss that expression, guys.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Erratic thought patterns. Okay, so I ranked them all for myself, and this
What
is
about-
like
what about-
if you were in a red book, like the old red book thing. Are you a manic depressive? What?
What about
The magazine, you mean?
Yeah.
what about erotic thought?
Oh, tons. The Don Juan syndrome. Yeah,
That's normal.
The need to be appreciated by the
That's
opposite
normal.
sex. Yeah.
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 I think the norm is like a dozen a day
That's
for
not
men.
manic depressive, isn't that a separate?
Erotic thought, a dozen a
It's
day.
part of. Wait, erotic thought is manic depressive.
No, erotic thought. It's separate.
Okay, well
Yeah.
that's a separate one. I wouldn't mind throwing that in there.
Yeah, but I think the average for males, I'm trying to say, is about 12 a day.
12 a day.
Erotic thoughts. Yeah.
Oh, Jim, I sense it's on the low end
What?
for you.
Is that
No,
that about right?
Maybe
That's
average.
good. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A dozen.
I heard
An even
Awesome.
dozen.
I heard a lot of studies on that
Yeah.
about erotic thought, and that they did a very thorough study on men with masturbation. They realized that 75% of men masturbated in the shower, and the other 25% sang one particular song.
So what?
Sang one particular song. Do you know the name of that song? I thought you didn't.
Sure.
I thought you didn't. Yeah, you walked me into that one. Since you you mentioned erotic thoughts. I thought that was perfect. So, but I realize, much like people that read their astrological charts, that sometimes you can read in it's a self-fulfilling
Yes.
thing where you're
It's
saying
generalized.
Yeah.
It's vague enough or general enough that a lot of people could read in.
Yeah, if I'm
to
not,
make it
I
sound
mean,
true.
everyone pretty much probably displays manic because you go through seasons of feelings, right?
Well, the way we're used to talking about it is everybody experiences everything at some point. And so it's a matter of degree.
Yeah, and sometimes you're more prone if you're tired, you're worn out, you've been through a spate of
Stress is a biggie.
yeah. So that's the reason why I went to a couple therapists and stuff like that. And when I was really in the throes of drinking, I was going through what you might call agoraphobia, but that was just isolating. I mean, that's alcohol. That was just pure alcohol building up guilt, the guilt thing, put on in behavior and all this stuff and your ideas. You're not getting any better, and you're just getting on this locked in thought loops, whatever it was. So, I moved off the manic depressive. Someone called me manic one time years ago. And I think it's someone that took a psych course, and it was in high school, and they were reading that, and they said that, and someone said it in college, and I said, wait a second, unless everyone's telling you that, sometimes people do things that, they say things that are less than helpful. They actually sometimes
make you feel much worse.
Mean. It's trying to be mean, but
Yeah.
they're not exactly sure.
No, it's
they don't
like-
have that. What we were talking about, the
It's name calling.
internal dialogue, or you were talking. What would you call
I
it?
call it self-talk.
Self-talk.
You're talking to yourself while you're. It's a kind of processing, really. I think, and it inhibits you somewhat because you don't just blurt out the first thing that comes to your mind. Usually, you're thinking.
Sometimes
Sometimes
do.
you do.
I
Everybody
do.
does sometimes. But
But a lot of times, I mean, how many times do people just blurt out things they're thinking about all the time?
Yeah, and most of the time it's innocent enough.
With that, yeah, and unless it's crude and
It's just a normal
on that.
call and response.
yeah, what's the one where they're ticks and they shout out
Conversation.
whatever goes on?
Tourette's.
Tourette's.
Yeah.
And that's a
Tourette's,
neurological.
Tourette's
basis.
not necessarily. They're not thinking those things, are they? Would they have to be in
It's,
order to shout them out?
it's more on autopilot. No?
Yeah.
From a
Because
neurological basis.
sometimes it's things they don't want to say. Right?
Yeah, they're not able to inhibit.
They're afraid of saying things, and then they go to the worst thing they can say.
It's like almost like an involuntary verbal.
I've said that before. When
Yeah.
I've been in a conversation with someone I was very close with,
Yeah.
and then I realized that I said too much right at the time, much like the classic locking of your keys in your car when you're watching the door close. And
too late.
Split second is too late. So, the manic depressive thing I was leaning on, and I said was self medicating and doing all those things.
Well,
Especially when I'm not drinking, it doesn't really.
You think you're different when you're not drinking in that way?
Yeah, for long periods of time that it doesn't rear its head like that. The depression and the anxiety. And though anxiety, they did not directly list that.
The symptoms? There are.
Okay. Anxiety.
But they're different kinds of anxiety.
And it's something, well, you knock out the substance abuse and the depression and the other things.
Yeah.
Because depression is a relative term, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
if you're up here all the time, when I say up here, let's say you're floating up at 80% most of the time,
Yeah.
and then you dip down to the mediocre, that may feel depressive, but other people are living there, and that's their baseline, and they spend most of their time below
Right.
it. So
Right.
who knows? Delusions of grandeur. That's what I was thinking. Illusions or delusions of grandeur?
Delusions.
Okay, delusions, not an illusion.
No, delusions are false beliefs.
How about an illusion?
An illusion is just something that's not real.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
Well, in a sense, but I think delusion is clearer because it's a belief system.
So
that you have.
grandiosity. So you'd have to think, what if you thought you were slightly more like you were slightly more, not grandiosity,
Not way more.
how about delusions of elevated mediocrity?
I like that. I think
You
you're
like that?
coining a new term.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
elevated mediocrity,
Somewhere in
where you're not the
between.
greatest,
Yeah.
but you're pretty great. I'm great, but I'm not pretty great. And if I was any better, you just hate me.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, I really thought that. I said maybe I managed a new type of disorder by just thinking, well, yeah, I'm pretty. I'm
the only
pretty
one.
great. I'm pretty
I'm the
great.
only one that can have this disorder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well.
That would be
No, I realize.
grandiosity.
That would be great. I don't believe a lot of people. I believe tons of people have the same disorder. Same people that get up and sing
Some
all the
people
time.
are competitive with their psychological symptoms.
Yeah.
Like I have the very best delusions of grandeur.
Really?
Oh yeah. No, I mean that somebody.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me your.
I thought you were
I was
gonna
going to
tell
hear.
me,
I was going to
too.
hear something about your.
Learn something new.
Maybe you do something with iambic pentameter, that you did a whole analysis session using Shakespearean language, or perhaps a haiku.
Well, I did fall asleep on a couple of guys.
Oh, okay.
Does that
Tell.
count?
Can
Yeah,
you
last
tell?
week we had some
Did you ever
interesting-
hear that story? Let him tell. It's a really funny story. When he fell asleep in a therapy session.
Okay, let's hear it. I think you may have done that story the first time we were here. I think you told that story about
All right,
falling
never
asleep.
mind.
I'm not sure. Let's hear it.
Well,
It's a good story, so it's worth
yeah,
it.
it's a patient I've been seeing for a long time, an older fellow.
You sure you didn't want to just say you heard about someone who did this?
No, because he
Instead of
doesn't
saying-
have the need to be perfect. He
Okay,
doesn't
okay,
need this.
okay. I didn't want to. I didn't want to.
He can't
Hey, wait a
be-
second. Before you start the story, can we just take
A break.
a moment? No, so they can insert a commercial. Insert a commercial.
If you want to get your information about the Florida Keys straight from the locals who live here and the ones who love it here, we've got you covered. Visit 43keys.com as your source for everything Florida Keys. Sign up for our newsletter and you'll always be up to date on all the Keysy stuff that's going on down here. Go to 43keys.com. That's the number 4, the number 3, keys.com, and sign up today.
And we're back,
Okay.
Joel. So we're going to get back to this story. You had a patient.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I had a patient.
Just one.
32 years.
Just kidding.
patient.
Just kidding.
And no, this guy was. So I've been seeing him for a number of years, and he's sort of business type, and he talked in a monotone, and he had like a 6 p.m. time slot, and so I found myself, like in the middle of the session. Next thing I knew,
6 p.m.
yeah.
Horrible time. Okay, I understand.
My biological low point.
Was it a warm office?
Maybe office or orifice? Did you?
Stop it.
Was your office warm?
Stop
Yeah,
it.
orifice. Was your orifice warm and
You're in
moist?
public, Joel.
Back to gerbils.
Yeah, gerbils, yeah.
Can't get rid of the damn.
No, I'm
gerbils.
just thinking. I'm setting the scene for a warm office. 6 o'clock. I mean, I always had a problem with 5 o'clock.
Might have been the
getting
vodka.
out. Drinking, that'll do it. Okay.
Might have been the vodka in my water bottle.
Okay. So this is
So-
patient.
So anyway, so the next thing I know, I'm waking up, and I hear myself say, "They're all like works of art."
You did tell me this one.
Did I tell you this?
They're all like works of art.
Yeah, and now I'm fully awake, and I'm looking at the guy, and he's got his head tilted toward me like this, in a kind of questioning way, and he's like, "What do you mean?" And so I just went back to the last thing I remember him saying, and I just related to that and free associated that, to bridge between they're all like works of art and the last thing he said.
What was the last thing he said?
I can't remember now.
Okay. You remember it's all like work.
Yeah. And so
I'm going to try that sometime with you when we're talking all of a sudden, and I'll just put on dark sunglasses and then
nod
then
out.
go, it's all like works of art. And you're going to go, you son of a bitch, did you fall asleep?
On me?
You're copying my shit.
Yes.
Is what I said.
No,
So,
I thought you
so here, there's an epilogue to this story, though. So we finish off the session, and he gets up to leave, and he gets to the door, and he turns around to me, and he says, that's the best session we've ever had.
There was a movie, Something About Mary.
Oh, I love that
and
movie.
he felt his therapist, he'd be talking to his, what's his name? Stiller.
Ben Stiller.
Ben Stiller. He's talking to his therapist, and his therapist runs out to grab something to eat while he's talking, and he comes back and he wipes his mouth. And he mentions something about a rest stop, and he just latches on to it, and he goes, rest stops are the bathhouses of the 1990s. That's what gay men mean. He just said he just latches on to the one thing. Did you latch on to one thing when someone said something and all of a sudden, oh yeah, I remember something. Okay.
But here's something very interesting, I think, but not funny. What it reminds me of when they do studies on clients and therapists or patients and therapists rating sessions. What do you think was how high would you rate this session or how low? There's almost no agreement between the therapist and the patient. Like in this case, the therapist.
Oh, the therapist could think it says we reached no.
I fell asleep.
Insight.
But but the client thought it was a great session. But I think that's.
Wouldn't it be
normal?
Wouldn't that be what an eternal thing that the client feels unburdened? They didn't feel pressured. You fell asleep. You didn't stare at them with that judgmental look on your face. Didn't start playing the crazy music. Did you put the hat on their head so you could record their thoughts and make music out of their thoughts?
It was a relief.
The tinfoil
the musicological later, whatever, that converts all their thoughts to music.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, but it's just
I think that would be my. Yeah. Do you remember the show? There was on Comedy Central. There was a show, and you had to watch this show because it's classic. The comedy show was Bob Newhart was one, but Dr. Katz.
Cartoon. Yeah,
the cartoon. I thought it was very good.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah,
that was great. But I have to say, just let me get this in, that I did think with that patient, I did entertain the possibility that, as I'm in that twilight state and I'm coming up and I'm saying they're all like works of art, and then I related to the last thing I can remember him saying, I thought that was maybe like one unconscious to another.
Oh, so you're equating that the best work you've ever done is when you were asleep.
Half asleep.
It wasn't probably not a deep sleep. It was probably just a doze.
You have to catch it just right, Jim.
Okay, I get it. I understand. Okay, we'll move on to entitlement complex.
Ooh,
I have an entitlement complex.
What do you think you're entitled to today, for instance?
I got what I want. I'm entitled. The things I have today I'm happy with. But sometimes when I'm unhappy with my station, wherever I am, in life, I think, wow, I think I deserve more. And then I realize being aware is a curse, because you call yourself out. I'm not saying I'm better for it, but I realize I am that way, which is bad in itself.
You think being aware that you have a problem is worse than not being aware of it?
Oh, it's worse than not having it.
Oh, it's worse than, but if you have it.
Do you think that's a call you can make for yourself? That whatever it is you're thinking,
if it causes you, it may not be entitlement. It could be something else. It could be the malicious dialogue, what I like to call, or the delusions of elevated mediocrity.
I love that term.
You like that?
I love it.
How about the? Okay.
Didn't I think of that after all my years of training? I had so many.
Okay, well, I just came up with this while we were sitting.
Yeah.
I think we
brilliant.
I think
brilliant.
we. Oh, thank you. I think we.
Elevated mediocrity.
Elevated mediocrity.
Stop.
I hope I didn't lift it from anyone.
Forcing his grandiosity.
Yeah, I know it is. It's okay. How about IED? And that's not an
explosive device.
No. It's intermittent explosive disorder.
Yeah, that's a relatively new one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that would be someone.
No, in the classification, it's relatively new.
Well, isn't that generally the same thing?
Anger,
outburst
disorder?
anger.
No.
Didn't he have that before?
It's like an impulse disorder, right? But there's
specifically
violence.
Anger.
There's violence to it.
Oh, there's violence to it.
Well, explosive.
Physical violence.
They can be.
I've had a,
but not necessarily.
That's different than impulsive. Let's say impulsive, like I got to have that hamburger.
I had that. I do.
Explosive is
with not to people. I don't go and attack people and stuff and get cursed.
No.
The keyboard very. I'm pulling back on the R-rated. We're gonna list this as explicit, even though every episode I list is explicit, just in case
somebody might think it's explicit.
Well, no, because of language. Because I might say something that's kind of
somebody.
Offensive.
Yeah.
So this way, I'll just say explicit, and people go, "No, that wasn't explicit." And then I'm trying to lull certain people, maybe get a nice religious audience, and then the next show we're going to be talking about strippers. So, and then they'll get all offended, and that'd be great. It's great.
It's all
podcasts. It's all really good, and it stretches their boundaries. But
Right.
me, the freaking out in the car, getting angry, that doesn't happen as much anymore either, and that could be mollification through age.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, one of the things you do with
maturation.
What's it? Maturation.
intermittent explosive, one of the things you might check on is if there's an organic basis to it, like cortical overexcitability, something like that, which is like a step below kind of epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
So you have an easily excitable
But that
Warren Zevon.
Oh, so you wouldn't really
excitable
need
boy.
you really wouldn't need a catalyst. Are you suggesting that? But if you have an organic one, wouldn't you just happen anyway then?
No, it
Or you have to have a set of
there's always an
circumstances.
interaction. So it's just that you're more easily triggered, let's say,
Yeah.
and the response is more extreme.
Your threshold might be lower.
Yeah.
I was reaching for that one because that's not
No.
a thing anymore for me.
That's a rarity. Sometimes you do treat it with anti-epileptic medication.
Okay. Just
But entitlement, I think, is a big one. I think a lot of people have some degree of, varying degrees of entitlement, feeling that they're special. They shouldn't have to wait in line. They shouldn't wait in the car when there's a traffic jam. There's, sort of impatience, low frustration tolerance.
I had a coworker who her boyfriend was playing music. He controlled the jukebox. We have a jukebox that we control
saw
through
that,
an
yeah.
app, and they can actually control the volume, which I thought was surprising because that's that's kind of invasive when you're not there. You don't have to be there. This guy was actually 1,500 miles away.
Kidding.
Oh yeah, you could do it on your phone.
Wow.
So he was saying he knew she was working. He's playing music for her, and he has it cranked up. Now, loud is 40. Loud is 40 for everyone. That's the most we would put it on is 40.
Yeah.
He had it up to 80.
Oh my gosh.
It goes up to 100. 100, I can't even imagine what his 100 would be. So I walk in, there's a girl cleaning and stuff like that. I say, this is kind of loud. Can you turn this off? And she goes, no one's here. And I'm looking at her. I said, well, there's a person talking to me right now, and there's a woman over there. And I know you don't think too much about a Mexican coworker, but I don't think she enjoys listening to Marilyn Manson at 80. On a scale, I mean, and the 80 it should be 80 should be the top. They should get it to because it was really loud. And she goes, no one's here. She kept on repeating that, and it's like a denial of personhood.
Yeah.
Like there's no customers here. It's just you guys.
But
it's our hearing,
yeah.
our hearing, and
Yeah.
it happens. So it happens in my spin class when people say, "Can you turn up the music?" I say, "Wait a second. There's like 6 people in the spin class that have earplugs in already." And I hesitate to ask. I mean, just like you're entitled. I need to listen to it. I need to listen to it loud so I can get into it.
Yeah.
It's
It's kind of selfish
Yeah.
entitlement.
Yes.
Well, it's
Overly self-focused.
I mean, don't you want to?
But is it deeper
Wait, is it-
selfishness? You can just say selfishness, or what's the underlying? Because obviously, wouldn't you rather be? I mean, in the best of worlds, it's best not to feel entitled because you can go through the world, and when you're waiting in line at the checkout, and the person has 3 items that don't have a price on it, and they can't get the price, and they got to go and get it. If you think you're entitled to be moving through quickly, or at the airline. How about the airline? There you go, waiting, and there's 180 other people.
We never do
100
that well.
other 80 people, and you're thinking, well, I mean, if you sit back and think, if you get in a moment of clarity and you say, well, you know what, it would probably be best to think, wait, I'm in it with all these people at the same time. Just like the hurt when we went through Irma and things like that, we're going through the same thing. Why it was kind of selfish. Now, entitlement, I think, disappears when you lose someone close to you and stuff like that. It's a personal experience.
You mean like, why did that happen to me?
It did happen to you.
Yeah.
It did happen at the thing, and
But being entitled would mean
no. But that one
shouldn't
thing with
have happened
what's
to
in
me.
the group experience, I think the most entitled experience is when you have a shared event and you're acting as if it's a
Personal.
Personal
Take it
event.
personal. Yeah.
How about this one? Fire in a movie theater.
I would shout ice cream.
Is that it? I thought we were doing word association. Ice cream.
Ice cream. That's a pun. Did you get that? That's a pun.
Yeah, get it? Did I blow your mind?
Yeah.
Okay, well, movie theater or, in the movie theater.
I was getting at something.
You mean
here.
getting up and everyone you let the children out?
There
And
was a
everything?
big, that would be ideal. But that's not what happens. What happens is everybody rushes for the exit.
Yeah.
And it used to be labeled mob. What was it?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Well, that's a lemming kind of thing, isn't it? Where everyone's going at the same...
Yeah, but it's sort of...
Mass hysteria?
Mass hysteria. Mob mentality.
But there's always... invariably, there's always a couple people that see what's going on, and they don't do it. Like some people.
Right.
But the way that happens at the fire, where they get like at that France at the Orlando nightclub and things like that, people all heading to the door and they block it, and then the people that
people get trampled, and
some people stay back, and they end up, it's.
But when social psychologists looked at this, because they wanted to see, was it really mob mentality that people were acting crazy? And
self-preservation.
But self-preservation was kicking in, and it was a completely rational thing to do. Now, that's assuming that you don't have a son or daughter that you want to save their lives, and you would get them out ahead of you.
Uh-huh.
But if you're just there by yourself...
Like the Seinfeld thing with George, when the alarm goes off and he pushes the lady.
Right.
Pushes the old lady out with a walker out of the way to get out the door. And pushes the kid.
What about when the supposedly when the Titanic went down? They were very methodical, and they put the women and children in the lifeboats first, right?
Well, there was a moment. There was breathing room for that, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think the main thing for that would probably equate it is a plane going down. Because they say, make sure you get... they go like this. It's funny. They got to make the announcement. Make sure you put the mask on first, which would be counter to the self-preservation, because people are putting on their kids first.
Yeah.
But
it's sort of an instinct to protect your children.
My 7-year-old daughter called me out on that one.
What?
I think we were on a plane, maybe watching a movie, but the announcement comes on. Like, if the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself first. Yeah. Then take care of your kid.
Uh-huh.
So I gave her an elbow like this, you see? Me first. And she was like, of course, how can you help me if you don't help yourself? Bam!
Your 7-year-old daughter said that?
Very precocious child.
Wow.
Out of the mouths of babes.
What are we looking at?
We're looking at an iguana that is...
Oh, he's been hanging out. He likes the podcast. He's the last 3 times we did a podcast,
Really?
he was over here.
Excellent.
Over here. Yeah.
Okay.
He's a big
fan. He's a fan.
He's a big fan. Okay, so are there people that are just okay, or does everyone need therapy?
Glad you brought that up, because I think in some of these things, see, you can't be your own doctor, they say, and you can't be your own analyst. Okay?
No.
Psychoanalyst. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing these things, you don't have a good yardstick to measure it by, whether you have a problem with entitlement or you're manic depressive in the diagnosable way and that sort of thing. And this goes back to something we did last year. You were talking about the self-examined life.
Right over there.
Right? Yeah.
The unexamined life.
Unexamined life.
Is not worth.
The flip. Right. Is not worth living. Yeah. And I was saying, well, maybe not always, because, if you dwell on yourself too much and you get into too much of this stuff, you can drive yourself nuts.
And that
you
happens
can make yourself neurotic. Oh, yeah, that's me.
But also people who are narcissistic love to come in and talk about themselves. And it's part of their narcissism, and they're not necessarily going to change. So
masochistic or narcissistic?
I said narcissistic. People come in that want to be listened
What's
to.
That
they
disorder?
Want to talk about
there's
their problems.
There's a narcissist. What was the character? There's a a dual one, something narcissistic disorder. It's a combination.
There is those combinations, that threesome. Maybe it's narcissism and I forget. But that's another point. Like when I
feel that sometimes. I really don't. I like I'm interrupting now. Look at that.
Look at that. All right. No, I forgot no.
You're saying not everybody should examine themselves. It may not be helpful. You might get too stuck.
No, I was going to talk about diagnoses. So we have a manual that's about, 2 inches thick, a diagnostic manual. Mm-hmm. And, the first thing that's wrong with it is it's all continuous for anybody. And a lot of people are different from other people, most. And so you lose a lot of individuality when you start giving diagnoses to people and putting classifications on them. So when I'm doing treatment, I don't necessarily do the diagnosis thing, which is kind of rigid. Now, when I have to communicate with insurance companies or other professionals, then we do it in that shorthand where we slip them into categories. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So generally, in your view, are people on a continuum of? I mentioned it last year. Said something about families, and they said every family that is dysfunctional is dysfunctional in its own way, and then the axiom was, but every family that's well-adjusted and happy is happy in the same way.
Yeah.
Meaning that there's things in it, or could that work for the person, like when the individual person, that every maladjusted person, I guess you wouldn't say defective, you would have to say every afflicted person or a disordered person is disordered in their own way, and there's a mixture of it. There's not one, there's not one primary thing.
Yeah.
Is it possible even for a sociopath? A sociopath could they have, I wonder if they could have multiple disorders.
Sure.
Not just a sociopath.
Definitely.
A sociopath with an inferiority complex and Tourette's. I killed that motherfucker. Right? Shot him in the throat.
Yeah.
Just say, yell it. That would be. What do you think?
Yeah.
Because you were talking about sliding scale, how everyone is. And if you, let's say the last one, at what point do you step in with an acquaintance when you think they need, like, is there a point where friends and stuff like that and say, listen, you got to go and seek counseling or something like that?
We never would say you've got to.
How would you approach it?
You know what? I think it could be really helpful for you to talk to somebody professionally about this. I've said that to people.
This is because that's different for us, because they come to us expecting.
Yeah. So they
sort of expecting to get a free session.
Yes.
And when we're like, well, we can't really do that because we're friends. But, maybe it would be a good idea to seek out somebody.
It would be hard. It's very hard because is your judgment clouded by your friendship too?
That's part of it.
Yeah, because you see them with different eyes than someone who would see them without a past history.
Yeah, and also friendship is it's a two-way street. Whereas usually when you see a therapist, you are there. That person knows that he's in the position to try to give feedback or guide in some way, work on the problems that you as a client are bringing in. But you're not quite in that same relationship as a professional only with someone who's also your friend, even though they're coming to you partly because they know you have a professional background. They probably don't understand the conflict there as well as we would. Why can't you be my therapist?
Yeah. Oh, and while I'm at it,
It's a good way to lose a friend.
Yeah, if someone, no, this is not do with friends now. This is if you saw someone came to you, you couldn't do any work with someone who's under the influence, right? Can you? Or is it?
I always like to get them into a program.
They got to be detoxed before you work with them?
Detox, or, at least be in AA or something, a support group, be working at it.
But what about
outside the therapy suite?
What about if they're drinking or not? Did you have a rule about that? Even if they're in AA or in a support group? If
someone comes sees you and they had a couple drinks before they come to the session.
Well, that's when I reach for
his vodka.
Bottle with the vodka.
Okay.
You match them, right?
Do you learn anything more from someone? Is it actually the truth serum that people have? Do you learn anything more, or is it all clouded by intoxication?
It's disruptive.
I would agree.
You might want to see it one time as a therapist to see how they react to alcohol and what affects.
Yeah, I mean, but you don't learn more about their. Is it a mask? Is the alcohol a mask for it, or does it unmask people's inherent underlying disorders? Meaning, if let's say you're controlled and you control your responses when you're not drinking, then they are drinking, and they're just you see the jealousy, you see the madness, and all those things.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. But again, it's a two-way street. So one of the problems is that your interactions may not be getting in to the person.
Got it. I get it. We're here. Okay. You're saying that once you get something from the person, but I'm not saying I'm the one program you mentioned that people should go and seek. I'm in, so I would never suggest this because I'm in it. And I have a belief that sobriety is a thing you work on.
Yeah,
but I wonder. I imagine it's a big world out there. There are psychologists and psychiatrists that said, "Listen, we'll do a session with you drinking, and then you're going to come and listen to me. After that, you're going to sober up, and then we're going to talk." Mm-hmm. What do you think?
It's possible.
Well, I wouldn't say, okay, so get drunk for the next.
No, not drunk. They came in. Let's say they came in intoxicated, and say, "I will continue this, but even this, I want you. You have to come back the next time. I'm only going to see it is if
you come back the next time."
Yeah, I wouldn't throw anybody out unless. Not just for, having had a drink or being a little high or even very high.
Yeah.
I would throw them out for misbehaving or something like that.
Okay.
We don't like broken furniture.
The big question. So this didn't happen to you, but I'm going to ask you that I'm going to be a little thought experiment. You're in a counseling session with someone. And they reveal to you that they start talking about how they wanted to hurt people, and then they said they did in fact hurt people, and they were continuing to hurt people, and then you mean
physically hurt them?
Physically hurt people, and they're doing that. What point do you cut the session off, or you get up? What happens? Now you don't do this anymore, so you can tell me what happens at that point. And you think there's possibility that they've already done it, and they may have done the ultimate hurt.
Well, I get up, I edge my way toward the door, open the door, run out, call the cops.
Yep. Okay.
No, but also,
what would you do?
Also, but let me say one thing.
I'm not the same thing. No, it isn't. I'm a bartender.
No, but I'm
a bartender. Yeah, if I find out, I would just get up and call the cops. I've asked somebody who was drinking. They were drinking. I asked them point blank. They were involved down here. Someone who was involved in a murder investigation, and he was a trio of suspects. And I waited. He was drinking, and then I asked him some lead-up questions. I go, hey, and in the end, I said, did you kill that woman? That's to point out right in the middle of it. And it was perfectly fine to do it. But first of all,
what did he say?
He said no.
Yeah.
He said no. I was expecting some kind of confession or thing, and the denial does not admit guilt, but But then again, I guess if he acquiesced, does not 100%, but it definitely points itself to guilt. So
I would have done it.
But I did not. My thing leans more to like I cheated on my wife. What should I do? And blah blah blah, and do that stuff because that's.
They'll be talking to you about it.
No, they start talking about it or something like that. But if you're abusing a child or something like that, I know that's there's no it's not like a penitent. Even the religious, the closest thing with religious, I guess with doctors, you have your
the confidentiality doesn't apply in that case.
No, because the Hippocratic do no harm, right?
No, that's on our end, but.
No, but you'd have to, do no harm because they're doing harm, and if you don't stop them from doing harm,
Well, it used to be confidential for, priests and psychologists.
Priests, I understand that. Well, because freedom of religion and stuff like that, it's crazy. I understand. I'm not suggesting it's acceptable.
No, I'm just saying
I'm not saying I understand that.
Now it's against the law. You can't, there's a duty to report. If you realize that a patient of yours,
but they'll go to some guys will go to jail for that. But the church didn't change. At least the Catholic Church didn't change their view on that. And I imagine.
No, I think it's legal.
I wouldn't be surprised.
You have to report it.
You do. You do.
As a psychologist, you have to.
I know, but as religious, I would be. I would expect. I wouldn't be surprised if some priests and rabbis have not gone to jail rather than reveal confidential information.
Well, I think more at the beginning, but
I believe into this day some of these guys they take their roles serious because religious belief in their heads. I'm not saying me supersedes civilian authority.
Yeah.
That's I'm talking that way. In rational world where we live in, where you don't want people hurt and stuff like that, we go, someone's life well, let God take care of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But we know we have this information. Yes, that's common sense, but religion isn't about common sense, is it?
And it's a close call sometimes in the therapy suite because was that a real threat, or does this guy really represent a threat?
Yeah, and is this guy going to run away if I say I may have to report that? Technically, you can I just say something?
Sure.
The best practice of psychology is initially to write out what the rules are. And one of the things you write down that the client has to agree to is that if you become aware that he or she is in a position to hurt himself or somebody else, that you will report it, and that if you find out that there's been child abuse, even in the past, even if it's not going on now, technically you have to report that to social services, so at least they know up front.
I actually had a priest who came in as a patient, and he was sent by the diocese. And it was pretty clear there was sexual abuse involved. And right at the outset, I have to say, if you talk about that to me, that you've abused in the past, then I have to report that. Just telling them beforehand. So, there's that. So he didn't last very long.
If on this show you mentioned some plans you had against Jack in the pool area, I would dime you out in a second, Joel. If you said you were going to drown him and stuff like that, I'll turn you to Monroe County.
Yeah. I was just going to get upside down his noodle. That's all.
You'd weight his noodle down with fishing weights. Okay.
And we're talking about Jack, so. No jury would convict.
No. And we'll be seeing Jack soon. We're not saying anything about Jack where he is right now. So we're good and clear. We're 7 episodes. We're 7 episodes unpublished. So I think this episode will make it into probably the 3rd week of February.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah, 3rd week.
2.5 weeks.
2.5 weeks away. Yeah,
we'll still be here.
I mean, we're still.
Well, you said you signed something
February.
for 2 months, right? Till February.
Till the end.
The 29th this year.
No,
you're leaving on the 29th?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I say
for next year.
We've already reserved for next year, January and February. We just signed on.
Wow, it went really quick. You got here in the beginning of January?
Yeah.
really quick.
And I left
Much
for
too
a
quick.
week.
Yeah.
Came back.
Wow. Okay.
Unusual.
No, I was just going to say, with Jack, we're having a hard enough time figuring out who he is rather than where he is.
We're not going to talk about where he is right now. Let's.
We have no.
Get this volume up on my. Got to get my music up because we're going to sign up. Okay, so let's say goodbye to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
I'd like to thank Gabby and Joel. We'll be back. How about next week? God willing, right? And the bay don't rise. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see you later. This is Jim the Keys Martin.